All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest tonight. It's Rob from All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest tonight. Is Rob from British Columbia. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate the chance just to talk with you.
Absolutely, man. It's my pleasure. So I know you've had some experiences, so let's just get right into it. Why don't you tell
Yeah,
us
so
where you were, what you were doing, and what happened to you, man?
yeah, so you can probably tell even though I'm living here in British Columbia, I'm actually a British citizen, soon to be a Canadian citizen. Emigrated here with my family. I've got three boys. 2016, July 2016. Came from a city in England, so was very keen to be somewhere with outdoor access, and we have that here. You know, if I look 360 anywhere here, I'm surrounded by mountains. Just beyond some of these mountains is Washington. And if I take a 20-minute drive, I'm straight up a river valley with mountains, lakes, rivers, you name it. Um, so we first moved here. I had a view to really get into hiking, and I'm really into hiking. I'm going shortly after speaking with you, actually. Sunday is usually my hiking day. And I guess it was 2016. I want to recall about October 2016. So the rains, I always remember the rains had just started. It rains really heavily here in BC. And that's talking as an Englishman. It's really, really wet. But I guess it's a rainforest. And I went out with my wife and our youngest. He had just turned 6 at the time. And we went up we had a few hours. My wife at the time is a nurse. She was waiting for all her, I guess, credentialing to come through, and we said, look, let's go out for 2-3 hours. And we went on a designated trail. A couple of key things that I remember about this was we parked up at it's a very, like many trails, it's an informal parking lot. It's basically a clearing, and saw the sign for the trail. No cars in that trail at all. It wasn't the best day to go hiking. It was a bit overcast. It had been raining, and we were going up a trail. And when you start the trailhead, people had kindly left these sticks, I guess, to use as makeshift walking sticks. There was about a dozen of them. So we each took one and thought, oh, this is cool. We had nothing on us, right? Looking back, totally all prepared, complete bloody novices, you know, not even a bottle of water, no bear spray, no knife, nothing at all. Just because we were used to walking around parks in England. And we got up this trail, and I remember coming up, you know, it's now I know it's a brutal trail. We were completely ignorant. It's a lake, and we thought, oh, we'll get there in this lake in an hour. It's about a 5 or 6 hour hike to get to this lake. Anyway, we'd been up there for about an hour, and I remember going up. It was quite an incline, you know. You go up switchbacks and zigzag your way up, and there was a massive tree down. I guess looking back, what I now know, probably something like a Douglas fir or hemlock, and all the roots were exposed, and there was earth on these roots. And my youngest was fascinated by them, and we'd not seen this being English, and we were going, oh wow, look at the roots. And we were just chiseling away at the roots with our stick. And this was on the way up. And, you know, then my wife was sort of like, look, we've got to get moving, you know, time's ticking. So up we went. And then a portion of the trail came out onto an old logging road, very overgrown, old abandoned logging road. We stood up there for a bit, walked along this logging road. And then my wife said, look, I've got to get back. She was doing private care work. And I think she was doing like a late, you know, like a night shift. So she said, look, I want to get home, have a few hours sleep. So we came back down, and we hadn't seen anyone. There was nobody up there. You know, there was nothing. We hadn't seen a thing, and it was all fine. And we came back down and got to this same tree again. And my son was like, you know, Dad, look, there's a tree again. And he started chiseling away with a stick, and I did. The wife was nagging, you know, and I said, look, just give us a minute. And then my son started whacking the roots with our sticks. And, you know, that, I guess it makes a wood knocking sound, what I know now. And I started doing it, and we were whacking them, who could whack the hardest. And I don't know, was doing that for maybe half a minute, 30 odd seconds. and there's obviously trees all around, and there was a tree right in front of this down tree. And if you bear in mind, we were on an incline. This rock, when I say peripheral vision, it was right in front of me. I saw it clearly, even though I wasn't directly looking at the tree. Came flying out of the bush, I guess, well, it would have been from up above us, and smashed this tree, made this massive, and then you heard a thud as the rock hit the ground. My wife spun right round. I think she saw it in her periphery as well. And she turned around, and I'm a bit of a bugger for, like, throwing rocks in a bush and going, oh, what's that? Trying to scare people. I used to do that back in England. She spun round and she said, was that you? And I was kind of going, no, it's not me. And she said, well, what the hell was that? And I said, well, it's a rock. And then she said, well, where's it come from? And I said, up there. And I was looking up, and two things, looking back, because I remember this, because my wife's still not happy about it to this day. You could hear something breaking, like something was definitely breaking. And the other thing, I don't know, like you've obviously been outdoors. If you go on some of these trails, if you're walking in a group, sometimes you can hear the footsteps of the person in front, behind you. The ground sounds a bit hollow almost. You can feel it yourself when you're hiking. If you jump down on something, it sounds like you're on hollow ground. And I could hear, I'm not going to say footsteps, but something moving on the ground. And I was just saying to my wife, it's coming from up there. Now, we've been a minute discussing this. And then
Hey, Rob.
normally when he walks, he's like a little kid.
Hey, your audio fell out there.
Okay, give me a sec, Brian.
Your video.
I'm going to move and see if I can get a better.
So I'm going to go back.
Hold on a sec.
Right quick to see where it was.
Bear with me. Can you hear me better?
Yeah, I was hearing you great, and then your video just froze, and I lost your audio completely. Got to the point where you said you discussed this for spent a minute discussing this, and that's where it dropped off completely. So.
Okay. Can you hear me okay now, Brian?
Yeah, you sound great. Let me start back.
Okay.
Let me start back the audio recording on Audacity, and then you can just pick up it. Let me see what was leading into that.
From up there. Now, this is probably within a minute discussing this.
Could you hear that? No, it's fine. Yeah, so you said we'd been like a minute discussing this, so you can just pick up from there and go on with your story.
And then, as we were discussing it, I was hearing something, and I said, "Oh, there's something up there," and another rock came flying out and hit the same tree. And the trajectory of it was definitely thrown. It wasn't a rock tumbling or anything like that. And then the wife just said, "Look."
I lost your audio again. Your audio is gone. Let's see. Can you hear me?
I can just about hear you, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Your audio just completely, your video was fine, and then your audio just dropped out again like it was muted, so. Let's see.
It wasn't a rock tumbling or anything like that. And then the wife just said, "Look."
Yeah, we got to the point where you said the rock hit the tree, and the wife said, "You know what? Look," and then your audio just dropped completely out. So, let's try it again. Let me get back to the point where I can. All right. So the wife said, "You know what? Look," and then you can just pick up from there. Okay.
yeah. So the wife just said, look, I want to go, and that's what we did. We pretty much we pretty much were running back down the trail at this point. You know, I remember sort of physically pushing my youngest, and I said to him, we're not stopping. You've just got to keep going. I said, you know, you can't rest. And yeah, just had a, I'll be honest with you, I thought, you know, something's going to jump us. I didn't, look, I didn't know much about this subject at that point. So I wasn't thinking anything like that, but I just thought something wasn't right, you know, that we were in a lot of trouble. And, you know, at some point on the way down the trail, you could look and we could see our vehicle in the distance, and, you know, you had that bit of relief. And I was just literally like, just get running. You know, we hit the remote from as far away as we can. We got back to the car. There was no vehicles in that car. Got in the car, excuse me, and went straight home. And I'd probably say it was a good 10 minutes before one of us just kind of said, you know, that was a bit freaky. And my wife was like, I'm not going back. And I was a bit upset about it, to be honest, because you know, something or somebody had thrown rocks at us, and I was annoyed about it. And I think for a few days after, I was quite angry, almost where there was a little bit of me that wanted to have stayed, thinking, you know, somebody's there, and I'm going to confront them on this. But at the time, I'll be honest with you, we were crapping ourselves. So I didn't think too much. Well, I did think a lot about it, and then over time, you know, you forgot about it. And it was probably early 2017, yeah, the following year. I started work. I work as a physiotherapist, so I started work in private clinics. Up until then, I was working in a hospital just because it was a job. So I started doing my usual physio. So I meet people from all walks of life, and I meet a lot of hunters and stuff around here as patients. So I just got talking to a few of them, and I said, you know, what would throw rocks at you? And you know, looking back, some ridiculous answers. Like, the trouble is, when you're a landed immigrant, people think you're literally naive to anything, like you're pretty dumb. So I had people telling me, oh, it's a bear. And I know as a Brit, bears have claws. They don't blow a rock. So I was going, oh, you know, bears throw rocks. Oh, yeah, they throw rocks. They can throw rocks. I've seen them do it. And I was like, and they can hit a tree, smack on the same tree. Oh, yeah. So I had that. And then I also had, you know, there's crazies up here that, you know, marijuana grows and stuff like this. And they were trying to get you away. But what I thought all along was, if that was the case, they wouldn't want us coming up any further. And this was on the way down. So if somebody had been watching us, we were on the way down. So I was, anyway, I didn't think too much of it. And then a couple of things happened that really got me into this. My wife befriended a couple that she used to do. She also worked as a cleaner while she was waiting for her nursing. And a couple that she used to clean the house of, a retired couple, he's retired forestry. He's worked in forestry his whole life. So I don't know how many years that would be, like 40, I don't know, whatever years. And they really got us into hiking. They've been great. They live in a small town called Agassiz, which is very close to Harrison Hot Springs, Sasquatch Provincial Park. So we've got out on amazing hikes with them. And anyway, they came round to the house one evening, and I was sat quietly chatting to him, and he was sort of going, you know, do you like hiking? And I said, well, I'm trying to. And he said, look, we'll take you out. And I always remember I said to him, what would throw a rock at you? And he said, what do you mean? And I told him what had happened, and his whole complexion changed, right? And I still didn't know enough to probe. And he went, and he was sort of like, and I went, some people have told me a bear. And he went, no, that's bullshit. And I said, well, that's what I thought, you know, but I said, you know, you've got to be respectful to a patient, and you don't say that. So then he said, oh, it was probably some crazy hermit. And I was going, well, you know, or he said people were playing with you. And I said, well, there was no vehicles up there. And he said, oh, there's a lot of crazy people out in the bush. So I was like, oh, okay. And a couple of weeks later, we went out on a hike with them. And his son came out from Vancouver. And his son's a really hardcore hiker, does loads of, you know, overnighters, you name it, goes out solo. And we broke away from my wife and his wife, and the three of us were there. And straight away he went, Rob, you know, tell him, tell my son, you know, tell his son what happened. So I was like, what do you mean? He went, tell him what happened. So I'm telling him. And again, his son's like, and then the two of them have got this look, and I'm going, what's going on? And they're like, no. And then his son's like, where was this then? You know, and I was going, oh, it's not far from here, blah, blah, blah. And I was going, look, quit the bullshit, you know, just tell me what it is. And they didn't, but there was something definitely cagey about it, you know. Anyway, I still wasn't thinking what your, you know, this podcast is about. And then it was a short while later, I was treating an RCMP, a cop here. I think you're ex-law enforcement. So, you know, we have the RCMP, the Mounties, basically. And this particular cop, she was indigenous, she was Aboriginal, as was her husband. Husband was a keen hunter. So I'm treating her, and I told her, and she, you know, she said to me, what have you been told? And I told her, and she said, well, you know what my people think. And I said, oh, what's that? And then she talked about Sasquatch. And I said, is that not a load of tourist crap, you know? I'd been out to Harrison Hot Springs. If you go to Harrison Hot Springs, that's where John Green used to live, out near that area. There's, you know, you can have your photo taken with a Sasquatch, you know, all that thing. And I've done Loch Ness years ago, and I thought it's the same thing. It's there to get the tourists in. But she was dead serious, and she said no. And actually, interestingly, I always remember, because I still see this patient from time to time when she gets, you know, complaints. And she said, I would wonder whether it was either wanting you out of the area, or it was wanting to get you out of the area because there was a danger that you hadn't seen. So I guess, you know, when I asked her, she said maybe there was a cougar. There's cougar in this area. We've had a close encounter with the cougar, the bloody bears and everything. So that was very interesting. So she kind of opened my mind. And then, if I'm honest with you, you know, I'm one of these, if it takes my interest, I'll go full on in and read up. And so I started getting books, reading on the internet, and then you find out there's this whole wonderful world of sane people, crazy people, conspiracy theories, you know, the whole shebang. But I really got into it a little bit too much, honestly. So that every time I went out, every little thing I heard was, you know, is it a Sasquatch? And, you know, at one point my wife was like, you just need to calm down. And I also actually, and this probably wasn't the good thing for me, I got into the missing 411, missing 411. I started buying books, and a couple of the cases are around this area. And I'll be honest with you, I scared myself silly where for a while I wouldn't go out. I'll be honest with you, you know, I'd walk out and I'd start thinking, and I'd almost start running back to the car. I got a little bit too like into it, and I just didn't go out for a long time. You know, my wife was like, are you not going out today? No, you know, the weather's not right, or blah, blah, blah. But then this is, so I then went off the subject a little bit. I don't know. I just started to think maybe I've just overreacted. I've looked into it too much. You go on the BRFO site, and regardless of what you think about that organization, I think for most people who look into this, you get on that website. I looked at where, you know, sightings were, and there were sightings very close to where this had happened. Sorry, Brian, I'm just going to let these dogs out. Come on, out. Sorry, Brian. And so I got into that. And then we went to Harrison Hot Springs again, and there's actually a Sasquatch museum there, tiny little museum. It's created a bit of public outroar recently, in that they're spending $1 million on expanding it, and the locals aren't too happy because they think the money should be spent on better things. But anyway, I went in there, and it's a cool little museum, and they have casts, you know, and that's blew my mind, like, because you see a cast in a book, and then when you see them in person, it's a it's totally different. So anyway, I was chatting to the lady in there, and I just said, "Oh, I think this has happened," and she said, "You need to speak to so and so." Now, I'm not going to tell you who this guy is, just out of respect for him, but and I'll also explain why. So she said, like, he's Mr. Sasquatch around here. He looks into all sightings. He actually helped set up the museum. Him and another guy. The other guy, unfortunately, I think passed away a couple of years ago. But anyway, this chap has written books. I actually bought one of his books, like Sasquatch in BC, and it's got sightings and stuff. And, you know, for me, I suddenly realized that where I am historically, there's been a shed load of sightings. And I got in touch with him and was chatting to him about this, and just wasn't very impressed with him. Just found him a little bit arrogant. I think he literally thought, like, here's some English person that really doesn't know his ass from his elbow. He told me, listen, it was a crazy hermit. And I was like, no, I said, because I tell you what, Brian, I don't stand nonsense from people. You know, I when I was a student at university, I used to do bouncing door work. I'm used to confrontation, and like, if you threaten my family, it's game on. And if I'd had the slightest inkling, that incident with the rock throwing, that somebody has thrown a rock, I would have gone up there and found them and given them a hiding. But I didn't have that sense. I just knew something was really bad and we had to go. So he's telling me it's a hermit. I'm like, do you think so? And then I just started asking him, you know, like about general stuff that I'd read. And he said, you know, 99% of people see a bear. And I said, well, I'd seen a bear at this point. And I said, I don't think you can mistake a bear for one of these. I said, bears have ears, you know, they have a broad head, a snout. I said, they have little narrow shoulders. I said, everything you read about these things, they're bloody huge. You know, they're like coat hangers. And he went, no, it's bears. It's people not seeing it. I asked him about, you know, throwing rocks and stuff. And he said, no one's ever seen them do it. So it's pure speculation. I asked him about wood knocks. He said the same thing. No one's ever seen it. It's pure speculation. Everything was like this. And it got to a point where I said to him, you know, excuse me, I said, do you actually believe in this subject? And even then he was like, well, yeah, you know, I do. I kind of think I've seen one, but I'm not sure. Because I said, you know, no disrespect, but I said, you're really negative about this. Anyway, I got really despondent after that. I just thought, you know what, it's it's bullshit. It's I've got to stop thinking about it. And I did for a very, very long time. And you know, put the books away, stop listening to podcasts, you know, that type of thing. And I just found him really dismissive. And, you know, every time we drove past a museum, I would like, you know, sort of thing. But anyway, quite a while went, and then, you know, COVID came. What was that? That was 2020, wasn't it? I couldn't work. My wife was still working. She's a registered nurse, but my clinics, they all got shut down. So I just went hiking like several times a week. I just thought, you know, I've got to get out. I was very lucky to have that, actually, Brian. You know, it was a lifesaver for me because I struggled with it. And I came across a weird footprint. I don't even know if it was a footprint. I took a photo of it. It was quite boxy looking, but bloody big, made an indentation. This isn't the one that I sent you, by the way. This was another one. And that same morning, you know, I was looking at it and I thought it was weird. And I'm not an expert. I don't carry plaster cast around with me. I just hike because I love the outdoors, you know, and I still do. And I thought, oh God, so I took a photo. But what happened that same morning, about an hour or two later, I was eating my sandwiches. I always bring a lunch with me. And, you could hear the creek. I was fairly close to a road, and then across the road is another very big valley. And if you go through that valley, you hit Washington, just geographically speaking. And I heard whooping. That's all I can say. If I was back in England and I was in London Zoo, I'd think I was near the ape house. It was really loud, and it was definitely coming across. And it was one of those, you'd hear it and you'd stop, and then you'd hear it again, and it probably went on for a minute, 2 minutes. And I thought, oh God, try and get this recorded. And typically what happens, like, I go moving over to get closer with my phone. I'm fiddling around with my video on my phone, and it stops. And looking back, the only thing that I've heard that sounds the same is, the Sierra sounds. There's an excerpt on that where he records whooping, and that's the only thing where I've gone, that's exactly what I've heard. So of course that starts to get me going again, for want of a better word. And I started looking into things. And then that cop that I was telling you about, I was treating her again, and I told her, and she said, yeah, Rob, she said, look, they're here. She said, I could tell you lots of stories. And I was treating her husband once, and he took me out. I'm the proud owner of a really old and battered 94 4Runner. I got an old 4x4. I've never done that as an English person, like nobody in England has a 4x4. And if they do, then they wouldn't even know how to put it into 4x4. So he took me out on it. He took me up a few like logging roads, and we got talking. And then he took me on this road, and he said, like, he started telling me that he was scouting the area hunting with his wife. And he said, I heard this crazy sounds, and he was showing me where it was. And he had some of the recordings on his phone. And this was where it was weird. To me, it sounded like a weird hyena, is all I can say, like really loud. And looking back now, Brian, it might have been a coyote, but this guy's been hunting since he was, an ankle biter. And he said to me, it's not a coyote. And he said he had a dog with him that usually would go tearing off after a bear or anything. And he said his dog was between his legs. And then he also said, I didn't get the other sounds. And I said, oh, what were the other sounds? And I always remember it. He said, it sounded like a pissed off gorilla. And I went, oh. And I started to probe him, and I said, oh, your wife was telling me about Sasquatch. And he went, yeah. And he told me a couple of things. This was further up in the province, because they don't do a lot of big game hunting around here, like moose. There isn't really that. It's mostly deer, and most people go out of area for that. And he told me two things. He said, I was on one hunting trip, and he said I had a, like, what do they call it, like the single scope for deer. I don't know what it's called. And he said, I was looking at this mountainside, and he said there was snow up there, and he said this big upright thing was booking it up this mountainside. And he said, I tell you, Rob, he said, there's no way a person could have done this. And he said, I just sat in my truck watching it. But he said, I couldn't get a big enough zoom to get anything clear. But he said it was upright and moving. So that's one thing. And he said, there's no way a person would have been up there and moved that quick. And then he also told me when he was younger, he went hunting in the snow, and they were in tents. And when they got up in the morning, there was lots of bare footprints, not barefooted footprints of different sizes. And he was telling me, I think he was with his dad and his uncle, and they said, you're to stay close.
I lost your audio again. Can you hear me? Your audio dropped out again. There you are. I can hear you now. Let's see.
So that kind of went from
Hang
there,
on,
and
let me
then
hang on. Let me get back to where your audio dropped out, so I can restart the recording. All right, we got to the point where he was telling you about being with his dad and his uncle, and then it.
yeah. So he told me when he
Hang
was
on, let me get to the point where I can
yeah.
stop it and restart you. Good thing I'm a hell of an editor. It'll be like
I'm
this
crap
never
with
happened.
technology.
All right. All right. So he was with his dad and his uncle. So you can just pick up there.
Yeah. He was out hunting with his dad and his uncle, I think somewhere up in the north of the province, and it was winter. And he recalled one morning outside the tent were footprints, like barefoot footprints, not bears in an animal bear, but barefooted footprints. And he said there were some really big ones and some small ones. And his uncle and his dad said to him, you know, you've got to stay close and don't go wandering. And so he told me, you know, like, unless you've got a family of crazy redneck hillbillies walking around barefoot in the snow, he said, look, he said, I've not seen them, but the vocalizations he heard that he also here, he told me, yeah, I'm convinced they're here. And he said, obviously with his indigenous background, you know, that they believed in it. So that started to get me going again a little bit. And I'd also say over this period of time, I've seen, you know, you could call them a tree break, but whether they're a tree break as in something has snapped them, I don't know. But they were weird tree breaks in that I would look around, there was no other trees nearby. So it's not like something fell on them. You know, you'd look on the ground, you couldn't see any dead trees. I would imagine that if snow had made a tree break, it would be a steady weight, like a bowing and go. And this was like a pure, like you'd snap a pencil, you know, and was down. And I'd seen numerous ones of those. And you know, you read up on them, and who knows? And I actually saw one about a month ago. And again, you know, you have a good look around and you try and think, is it something from up high? But who knows? So, you know, little things were going on like this, and but I made a point of just trying to keep calm about it and just enjoy the hiking, which I did. And then where are we now? 2022. It was 2021 was an interesting one for me. I think it was early summer. I went out with one of the dogs, and I love wildlife, Brian. You know, I'm going out after lunch today, and I'm always excited. You know, am I going to see a bear? If I see a raccoon, I'm so excited. You know, people here think we're nuts, but you know, we're English. We're not used to it. I saw my first possum a few weeks ago, and I was overjoyed about it. I spoke about it for about a week, and I've seen several bear, and if I see a bear, you know, I'm just the happiest person alive. And this morning with my dog, we actually saw 3 bears, but I think one of them was the same bear that moved back on the trail. Now, this was the morning, I think I sent you that photo of that, possibly that footprint. I'm walking along, and then you can just see it right there. And I remember just thinking, that's a bloody big footprint, you know, like a barefooted footprint. And I took some, you know, a couple of photos of it. I spent a bit of time feeling around. I could definitely feel toes, you know, like I was like, as a physio or just as anyone, I was like, there's the big toe, there's another toe, there's another toe. And I was like, oh shit, you know, this is a bit mad. And definite heel. The ground was fairly soft, you know, the rains were still about. I pushed
I lost your audio again. Your audio froze again.
It's playing up again. Can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm backing it up to get you back to the point where you can start over. All right, so we basically got to the point where you said the rains were still about and you were about to go into, I guess, pushing your foot down to see if you could make an indentation so you can pick up there.
Yeah, I couldn't make any indentations, no impression, nothing at all. So yeah, at that point, I just thought, I just thought it was really weird. And I carried on my hike with the dog and got home, showed my wife the photo, and she said straight away, she went, "Oh, wow, that's a massive footprint." And I said, "It looks like a footprint, doesn't it?" And she said, "Yeah." And at work, I showed it to a couple of hunters, and they went, "Oh, holy shit, dude, you've got the big fella." And they were just laughing about it. And I said, "Do you think so?" And they went, "Yeah, look, And then another one went, "Oh, it's a double bear footprint." And I'm aware of that phenomenon, but I went, "Well, there were no claws." And they went, "Oh, they don't always show claws." And I was like, "I think they do." No, 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 they don't always do that. Anyway, who am I to disagree? And then I made the fatal error, and I'll never do this again. And I should have known better. I'm on Facebook. I didn't join Facebook until we emigrated here, right? And that was because friends were nagging my wife saying, telling the miserable git to get on Facebook so we can keep in touch with him. I made the mistake of finding out a couple of like Sasquatch, British Columbia groups. And I sent this photo in, and I did it very innocently and just said, just want people's thoughts. I don't know, just what people's thoughts. I think the first comment I clicked, when you see you've got a reply, was fake. And I got all this fake and nice try, dude, and, keep smoking the good stuff. And I was pretty upset about it, Brian. I was like, what the hell? And I should have known better. I should have known that, if you post something like that, you're open to the wolves, And I just thought, yeah, okay. And I didn't do any more. And one person that I did send the photo to, and I think you might know him, and I did it just because it sounds silly because he's originally Scottish, is Shane Corson of the Olympic Project. So I sent him this, gosh, nearly a year ago, and I never got a reply. So I just thought, well, he obviously thinks it's bullshit. And actually about 2 months ago, I got this message from him out of the blue. "Hey, Rob, I'm really sorry. I don't know. I've only just seen your message." And he was like, "I'm intrigued about it. Could we speak?" And we spoke one evening, chatted for ages. Amazing guy, really nice. Not just about Sasquatch, but just about, as a British immigrant coming here. And he's not a million miles away from me. And he was a fabulous guy. And he kind of restored my faith in humanity, as it were. And he said, "Don't go near social media, blah, blah, blah." But anyway, he thought it was quite interesting. So that was pretty cool. And, he was saying, try and get a plaster cast. And I said, "Look, Shane, to be honest, I'm no good at that." And I said, "I hike because I enjoy doing it. I don't want to feel like there's pressure on me to do it." Every bear I've seen has caught me completely unawares. I've not gone out looking for a bear. It's just certainly been there on the trail. And, so anyway, I thought, okay, there might be, there might be a few things going on. And two other things have since happened. One of them, I guess everything I said, I'm speculating. I didn't see anything, but I'm speculating. But if you read around the subject, it's suggestive that, it could have been a Sasquatch. But there's an area that I started to hike a lot. I don't know if you know, we had really bad flooding here in November, like really bad flooding. My town actually got cut off at one point. The highway either side was just closed. And there was a lot of flooding up in the river valley. Large parts of the roads and properties have been taken away. So I've not really been back to this area since. But it's an area that, again, is fairly close proximity to the US border. It's actually in the valley where I heard those, what I described, that whoops that time. And I've been going up to this place every week for like 2 months, just hiking further and further into the trail. It's really overgrown. It's an old hiking trail, and I was actually going up there with loppers, cutting away branches and stuff. And lots of bear up there, lots of cougar. I've seen the sign footprints and scat and stuff. And this probably was a worse experience than the rock throwing. I was, for want of a better word, I got paralleled, is all I can say. I was going along the trail and could hear snapping, branches snapping to my right. And bear in mind, I'm on this trail, and then it drops down towards where the river and the creek is. And it was down that side, and you hear it once or twice, and then you start hearing something moving. You could hear something moving through the bush, and it was moving when I was moving. Every time I stopped, it stopped. And I'm very different now, Brian, in that, being English, guns is a no-no for me. I know you Americans like your guns, but the English, like everybody always laughs. Your average English policeman doesn't carry a firearm. People here can't believe it when I tell them. So, there's no way I'm getting a gun license. So I carry a bear spray. I carry, for want of a better word, it's like a machete. And then I carry a K-bar marine fighting knife. That's as fully armed as I get. So this kept happening, and I started to think, okay, something's here with me. Something's stalking me. And I would stop, it would stop. And then it got to a point I would stop and it would keep moving. You could still hear the branches breaking. And it seemed to be getting a bit closer. And the weird thing is, Brian, I could not make out where it was. I knew it was in front of me. At one point, I even thought, oh God, is it up in the trees? Because it sounded like eye level with me. So I'm looking up in the trees, I'm looking in the ground, I'm trying to look everywhere. And it was getting closer. So I thought, right, stuff it. I pulled the bear spray out. I had the bear spray in one hand, and I had this kukri in another. And I went all, Rambo on it and on this. And I just yelled out, stop effing around. I'm fully armed. I'm fully armed by British standards, like it could have been somebody with a gun who would have been laughing. But I went, I'm armed. Stop pissing around. And then it might have been a few seconds, maybe a bit longer. For 2 or 3 seconds, something like bull rushed me, something charged. It sounded like the forest was just collapsing, like in front of me, and it was right in front of me, and it made me jump that much that I actually fired off the bear spray very briefly. So when it did it, I kind of went ooh and hit this bear spray. And looking back, it might have only been a couple of seconds, and then it was nothing. And then I had to get away quick because I depressed the bear spray, maybe just for a second or two, but you certainly realize how much comes out. And you're told not to run if you think there's a predator. So I was probably doing Olympic speed walking at that point. And it's one of those weird situations that you actually start talking out loud and talking to yourself. And I was just shouting out loud, I'm going, I'm sorry, I'm going. And then I was saying out loud, oh shit, I'm going to die. Oh shit, I'm going to die. And then I'm not religious, but I was going, oh God, if you're there, just get me to my car, because I thought it's just happening. And I saw my car, and then I ran, I full on ran, I got to the car. Such a bloody old car. There's no remote. I was trying to fumble. I got the keys in, and then floored it and got out of there. And that was really weird. And I think, again, when you get a chance to get back and you're a bit calmer, what was weird was at one point I thought, God, is it even in the trees? Is this breaking sound coming from the trees? I kept looking up, and then I thought, and these are big trees here, Brian. You know, some of these are big Douglas firs and stuff, and it's thick forest here as well. And I just thought, oh shit, I'm going to get jumped from something out of the tree. And anyway, you know, I got home and I haven't told anyone that. I think I might have told Shane, but I'm not telling anyone that, you know. And I've been back a couple of times since, and I can remember where the area was. And you know, I'm very cautious going past there. Not to say that something lives there, but that did it for me. So I will be going back to this area again. They've been having to do repairs because of the flooding, putting in culverts on the service road, on the Forest Service Road, but I will go back. So that was a weird one. But I don't want to get on this subject, but I think you can't talk about this subject without talking about the woo word. And the wife and I had an unusual episode last year where there's an area not far, and if you go on the BFRO database, there's 2 or 3 historical sightings there, and it's very close to a correction center. And there's a mountain above the correction center. There's a couple of old Forest Service roads, and we were going up there. Really nice day. We were up there with the dogs, and we were going, you know, along this service road. And as we were walking, we both heard, well, it sounded like a little girl, but you couldn't make out exactly what the girl was saying, but you could hear like a really young girl. And I said to my wife, can you hear the girl? And she was like, yeah, I can hear a girl. And it seemed to be coming from near the tree line, inside the tree line. So I said, like, it's coming from over there. So my wife went, well, somebody's camping. And I went, nobody's camping at this time of the year. I said, who camps in there? Because it was right near the edge of the mountain. You know, if you'd gone in that forest tree line, it was a massive gradient. So I went, who's going to camp in there? I went, there's no flat ground. So as I started walking closer, it stopped, like no sound. And I was going, you can't hear it now. And my wife was going, no, I can't. And I would turn around and walk back to my wife, and we could hear it again. And we started to have a bit of an argument over this, because I was going, look, we've got to find this girl. And my wife was going, don't be silly, she's going to be with a family. And I went, no. I said, this is a big deal. I said, there's a girl, they might be lost. And every time we went near, not even into the trees, but every time we went near, it went completely silent. And this happened 3 or 4 times. And then my wife went, oh, just leave it. And I was like, look, that's just weird. That's not right. I said, something's going on here. Anyway, I calmed down really. And about 20 minutes later, we got to a point where there's a lookout, and we were looking out on the view and just enjoying the view. And then I suddenly realized that we were right above where we thought the sound of this girl was coming from. And you could see down through the trees. And I just said to my wife, where's the tents then? You know, where's the campers? And she was like, oh yeah. And I went, where's the girl? I went, there's nobody here. And I went, that's just bloody weird. I said, that's not right. And I don't know what that was. I have no idea. But like, you know, that we heard the sound of a young girl, but you could not make out what they were saying, but it was a girl talking for sure. And it's weird. It's weird. So I'm not saying that's anything Sasquatch related, but that's just, it's a bit of a, I mean, I don't know. When I hike now, I hike with a very open mind and very differently to when I first went. You know, I'm armed as much as I can, and I enjoy my surroundings, but I'm also aware of, you know, being careful where you go and what you see. It's if I would have thought, you know, we've been here 5 years. If I would have thought 5 years ago I'd be sitting here chatting to you on this subject, I wouldn't have believed it. But there's, in my mind, there's definitely something going on. I do think I do think, I said this to Shane, I don't think everybody always goes on about the Pacific Northwest being the hotbed for sightings, even this area. But if you look historically, there is, but the last sightings are way, way back, 20 years ago or more. Now, either people just aren't coming forwards or whatever, I don't know. But I don't think it's like the hotbed, if you like, in North America. I think there's other places where there's more reports. But there's definitely something going on. And I mean, I get teased savagely by my family over this, like even my dad in England, when he FaceTimes me, he teases me about it and stuff. But I don't say it much now. If I get the odd patient through and they're hunting or they're really keen hiking, if I've got to know them, I'll just drop a subject like, seen anything weird? I don't use the S or the B word. I just say anything weird. And sometimes people tell you stuff. I actually, I treated an elderly chap. He's originally from Northern Ireland. He still has this really thick Northern Irish accent. It's so funny. He's from Belfast and he's in his 70s and he's incredibly fit for his age. And he used to do a lot of bear hunting. And he just said to me out the blue, I've seen a Sasquatch. So he said, you might think I'm mad. And I said, no, I don't. I said, go on, tell me. And he said when he first came here from Northern Ireland, he used to have a road bike, like a Triumph or something. And he got a motorbike here and he didn't realize that, Forest Service roads aren't the same as British asphalt tarmac roads. So he said, I drove this thing everywhere. He said, I was always in the repair shop. But he said to me, it was really weird. He said, I'd never heard of this.
We lost your audio again. Your audio cut off.
And he didn't realize that, Forest Service roads aren't the same as.
I'm getting back to where we dropped out.
He said, I drove this thing everywhere. Yeah. He said, I'd never heard of this.
All right, it looks like we got to the point where he said to you that he had never heard of this, and then it dropped out. So get it started back up, and then you can pick up there. All right, there you go.
Yeah, so he'd never heard of it, but he said he was on his motorbike one day, I think going up an old logging road, and he said he saw what to him looked like a huge naked hairy man sunbathing. So I said, what do you mean sunbathing? And he said he was kind of like lying on his side, but with one knee, propped up. And then he said, as I got closer, he said he said he thought it was a man, got up, and he realized then how big it was. And he said, it just looked like a giant. And he said it was naked. He said he could see, that it was obviously a man, but he said it was hairy, and he said like proper.
We lost you again. Your sound is off.
Said it was hairy, and he said like proper.
All right, let's try this so we can hopefully. Sometimes the video and the audio go in at the same time. Can you turn off your video and just leave the audio on and see? I've had that happen in the past when the audio and stuff keeps dropping out.
Okay. Okay? I've turned it off.
All right, maybe that'll keep enough.
Yeah.
Let me see where we got to.
He said he could see, that it was obviously a man, but he said it was hairy.
All right. You basically got to the point where he said he could tell it was a man, but it was hairy, and I think you were going to say like proper hairy or something like that. So if you want to pick up.
Yeah, so he told me like, how some men can be really, really hairy. And he said this was beyond that. He said this had like fur. And then he said it just got up and walked off and disappeared. And he didn't think much of it. He just thought he just laughed and he said, I thought I'd seen a giant, naked, hairy man. So of course I laughed and I went, because of course you see them all the time. And he said, oh, I didn't know. And then he said it was a while later that he was he was somewhere, and I think he was going out with a girl at the time, a lady at the time, and then she was reading something, and there was a picture of a Sasquatch, and then he just went, "Oh, I've seen that," and then of course she said, "What the hell do you mean?" And he went, "Oh, I saw that up such and such," and then he said, "Oh, they're normal here, are they?" Thinking like they're like bears, and then she said, "No, no, it's 50-50 whether you believe in it," and he said, "Oh, I 100% have seen it," and then he also told me he smelt them. And he said, "Look, I've smelt bear, other animals," and he said these things stink like really bad. So he said, "I know I've been close to them before," but he never saw one again. So he was an interesting one, you know. And again, that was somebody that originally came from Britain. So it's like I said to you, Brian, the subject now, it does fascinate me, you know. And friends and family come over from England, and invariably one of the family tells them what I think about this, and then they tease me really badly about it. But I take them out only a short distance up a service road or a logging road, and I just say, you know, look at that area, and you know, I say to them like, how the hell do you know everything that's in that area? And I think then they realise just how vast an area it is. So it's interesting.
Yeah, the subject in general is what keeps me coming back to doing these shows and talking to people over and over, week after week. It's like the wood knocking. You know, you mentioned the wood knocking and the rock throwing, and I've went back and forth so many times with people on the show about that, and I've even said to myself, you know, it's never been proven that these things do those wood knocks or that they do the rock throwing, because there's not that one-to-one correlation of, hey, somebody had a sighting and the Bigfoot was using a stick to or a rock to clack together or actually see them throwing rocks that I'm aware of.
No,
But at the same time, there's so much anecdotal evidence, and people have seen it, had experiences where they've seen these things or heard these things. And then it's like you said, your experience in the woods. It's either one of two things. It's either a person throwing a rock at you and your family, or it's a Sasquatch. There's really nothing in between. Bears don't pick up
exactly.
rocks. There's nothing else in nature that pick up rocks and toss them or throw them at people. So that in and of itself is fascinating to me. And I talk to people often. You know, I was on Untold Radio with Doug Hychek as a guest the other day. And Doug was talking about the different stick structures. That's the other thing that I kind of have a hard time with is stick stick structures and tree breaks. I don't know what that means. Nobody
No,
knows what it means. And everybody has that opinion of, well, this is a territorial one. This means this. This is pointing towards water. You know, but at the end of the day, nobody really knows, right? But the subject and the phenomenon in and of itself is fascinating enough to keep me coming back and getting the stories. It's like the missing 411. You know, I've talked about the missing 411 on here before on the show. And I've reached out to David Politis and tried to have him come on the show, and he doesn't want to come on and talk about Bigfoot, you know. And I get that. I get why. I talked about that on D.A. Roberts' show when I was over there a couple of weeks ago as a guest, and we brought it up and we talked about it. D.A.'s former law enforcement, as so am I, and obviously David Politis is former law enforcement. He has to walk this fine line. He can't come out and say, hey, I think Bigfoot is responsible for some of these disappearances in the state parks, but he has to walk that line because when he turned me down about coming on my show, then I go to the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference, and there he is speaking as the keynote speaker and selling his books to all these people who believe in Bigfoot. So,
yeah,
yeah, I get the give and take, right? You know, he's got to use that to sell his books, and then, but he has to be very careful. He's never said and will never say that he believes that Sasquatch is responsible for some of those disappearances. Let me ask you: you've read some of the books. You said you bought some of the books and looked at them. Like me, some of the stories scare the shit out of you because it just doesn't make sense, right? What
yeah.
do you think in relation to Sasquatch? What do you think about that being a possibility? Do you think that Sasquatch or even maybe other cryptids are responsible for some of those disappearances in the national parks and the state parks?
I mean, I try not to read or listen to stuff about other stuff like, you know, you hear about Dogman and stuff, and I've never heard about that. but I think it has to be. I mean, these things have got to be omnivorous, and we're pretty easygoing, you know.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. You know, I think if you look at some of those stories and some of those disappearances in the state parks, some of them to me are even farther out there. You know, I've even had.
Sorry, I'm struggling to hear you with little there, Brian.
Yeah, I think I had to start talking because your audio dropped out again. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, I going back to what you said, I think there probably are instances, you know, like if you know, it's well documented with the indigenous people that they were, you know, kids, women were taken, and I believe that's the case. And you know, these things, whatever they are, they're bloody massive. You know, I don't think you can shoot them easily. Um, I personally don't think. I don't think we'll ever get to the bottom of this because I think we would have done a long time ago. Um, I think there's a lot of very smart people out there doing stuff, and I don't know. I this there's something not right. There's something really weird about it, and I don't know what it is. And you could go down some enormous rabbit holes, you know, looking at it, and some of them are quite fascinating. I think the one most convincing, most plausible, where you kind of think, yeah, I think that explains a lot, is you know, I've read his books and I've listened to him. Is Ron Moorhead, and I think he's got some really well thought out, valid stuff. And I think we forget that nature's an incredible thing. I mean, you look at an octopus, how it can change its colors. You know, if you think about it, that's really messed up. You know, like if you could imagine you didn't know what an octopus was and you saw it do that, you would wonder what in God's name was going on. Well, how maybe these things have that ability. But I also think, like, if you look around here, I'm not far from Harrison Mills. You've got the Chehalis Reserve around there. They will say that this is an ancient tribe. And look, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole or stir it up, but you know, whether you think of it or not, the Melba Ketchum stuff that can possibly explain some things. I'm not too sure about the Nephilim thing, just because I'm not necessarily religious, and that's no disrespect to people who are. And you know, if I'm wrong, then when the time comes, I'll realize I'm wrong, and I'll be going downstairs and not upstairs. You know, but that's when it's like, oh shit, you know, I've got it wrong. But there's that. But I think I think they I've recently done my citizenship exams, Brian, and I didn't realize that the Aboriginal people here originally came from Asia. And if you want to look at like the Bering Strait, how they talk about, you know, the whole thing with Gigantopithecus, maybe there was uh, what's the word I'm looking for? A subset of society that were giants, and they followed the Aboriginal, you know, indigenous people from Asia over here, but have, you know, how can I put it, slept around a little bit and a little bit of inbreeding, and things have gone a little bit amiss. And but it, I don't know, like you hear about people saying the government knows about them, and maybe they do. I mean, going back to this good friend in forestry, one of these days I'm gonna be up a mountain with him and I'm going to say, look, you don't tell me what you know, I'm pushing you off the cliff, so to speak. But I'm sure he knows something, you know, like I don't believe he spends, you know, 40, 50 years out in the forest. And this is what he did 5 days a week, and not see something, experience something, or know somebody who did, you know. But he's long retired, but he won't tell me if he does. So again, I don't know why that is. So there's I don't know, it's so hard, you know. I listen to some podcasts and people's accounts, and some of them, I mean, you might be listening to me here and thinking, you know, everything I'm
all right, you dropped out again, Rob. Can you hear me?
You know, I listen to some podcasts and people's accounts, and some of them, I mean, you might be listening to me here and thinking, you know, everything I'm.
Hey, Rob, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, you dropped out again. So, let's see.
I mean, you might be listening to me here and thinking, you know, everything I'm.
All right, you just gotten to the point where
You know, I listen to some podcasts and people's accounts, and some of them.
you'd got to. I've listened to some podcasts and some people's accounts, and then you kind of dropped out there.
Yeah, and some of the accounts, you know, I listen to for a couple of minutes, and I just think, no, that I don't believe them. They don't sound like they're even telling the truth. You know, I've done my job for 26 years, and I like to think that I can spend 5 minutes with somebody and just listen to them and know, like, look, you either have this back pain or you don't, or you know, you've got this shoulder pain. And there's some I listen to, and they're just, you know, when they tell you they see them multiple times, almost every time they go out, and I just think, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've gone out hiking and I've seen 5 black bears, right? And there are thousands of black bears here in BC, you know, and I know people that have lived here all their life and never seen one. So when I hear people saying that, you know, I see them all the time in different ones, I'm highly skeptical of that, you know. And I'd go with the adage that you see one when they want you to see one. You don't go out and find them. I think, look, I would love to think one day I maybe get a glimpse of one because I do believe in them. But if I don't, I don't. But I think it will be something that catches me completely unawares. It's not going to be, you know, and I make a point now, I go out and I enjoy the outdoors. You know, I call it my mental health day. You know, everything, particularly at the moment with everything that's going on in the world, it's just a nice getaway from it all. And I do look for wildlife, of course I do. You know, I listen to birds and stuff, and you know, I make a recording of a bird call. I go home and listen to it. Um, I it it's just very hard, you know. But the missing 411, I think there has to be something in it. Like you read those books, some of them, to me, it sounds like something has come down. I guess we're going down the UFO route and took them, right? But there's other things where you just think that's highly plausible that a very stealthy predator has come in and snatched them. And I tell you what done it for me recently. I remember watching a documentary. Do you remember that? It was a few years ago, that dreadful situation down in the States with the lady had that pet chimpanzee and it mauled her friend. And a chimpanzee, I don't know, 200 pounds, maybe a bit less. I was listening to the injuries. I had no idea. It was pretty gruesome. This thing pulled her hands off, like ripped her hands off. Now, I've been an anatomy lad with cadavers, you know, and seen how thick tendons and ligaments are. You know, you get a piece of beef and try and rip a bone off it. So if you've got a chimpanzee that can do that, and then you've got one of these things that, depending on what you read, can be, you know, 600 over 1,000 pounds. I had no idea what the strength of that would be, but it would be, you know, it'd bend a car in half. So for something like that to come and pick me or you up and go running off with it, and I've heard they move really quick. It's highly plausible, and anybody nearby wouldn't have a clue what had happened. So, I think definitely. I think, you know, there's maybe times where they can't be asked to run after a moose or an elk, and then, you know, this little hiker's coming along or what have you, mushroom picker, and it's you know, a quick and easy meal, or you've got a bit of a cantankerous one that just, you know, wants to kill something. So I think there has to be a portion of it for sure, for sure. And
Yeah, I agree with you, man. The story continues. The phenomenon we know is real, and no matter what you think about the stories that people share, somebody comes on the show and they share their experiences. They had some sort of experience, and it's theirs. So I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your experiences, man. It's been an honor and a pleasure talking to you.
yeah, I'm sorry I just kept cutting out. our Wi-Fi is a little bit temperamental, but it's nice to talk to somebody where you can talk to them and they don't laugh at you. um, I don't know anyone who does that, so yeah, no, I really appreciate it, and I don't know if the day ever comes where I see something. I said to Shane that he would be somebody I would tell, and I think after speaking with you, it'd be somebody else. But then, to be quite frank, I won't tell a soul. Um, it's just it's one of those. But yeah, no, it's who knows? I personally think in my lifetime we're not going to get an answer to it, but if we did, it would be fantastic. But I don't think it's ever gonna we're ever gonna get to the real bottom of it. But then that's the appealing side as well.
Absolutely, man. All right, that was awesome, man. Um, I will definitely have some editing to do, but like I said, I'll make that like all those breaks and
Yeah.
drops in audio and stuff like it never happened. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, that was great, man. That was. I think it's going to be a great episode. I think people enjoy it. The
Oh,
accent.
you're actually going to air it? Do you think?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to air
Oh
it.
God, oh, I didn't know. Okay. Oh, all right.
Yeah. I mean, is that okay with you for
Well,
me?
it is. Yeah. I mean, I think I said to Danny, I wasn't sure whether my stuff was really worthy of much, but
Oh man, it's
I.
some of my those are some of my favorite stories. When I think it makes
Oh,
it.
okay.
It's like you said. I think it makes it more credible. I think people tend to migrate over to those stories and gravitate to those stories more than they hear that I saw, like every time I go out, I see one, like you said, and I think some people just call bullshit on those stories. So it's
Yeah.
that type of story that it's very much like the experience I had that I can't explain when I was a kid. People have those experiences in the woods, and I think they hear that. Well, there was that time that this acorn came flying out of nowhere, and it's kind of now I look back, and so I think people really gravitate to the stories and enjoy it for sure. It'll probably be a couple of weeks before I get it out, but um, yeah, I'm definitely gonna air the show. I think, like I said, I think it's a great interview. So I think I lost your audio again. Are you still there?
I am. I lost
Oh,
you for a bit.
there you go. But yeah, like I said, I think it'll be a great episode, man. I'll get it
Oh,
out.
okay. Well, look, if that's the case, I mean, I did sit and think, oh God, I don't want a patient to hear it. But to be honest, if a patient's hearing it on this, then they're
They're
equally
already
as
heard
mad
it.
as what I am.
And you didn't use any names or anything that
No.
so
So you're not recording this now, are you?
I am, but I can stop. Hold on.
So look, off the record,